Welcome to EPG Pathshala. My name is Duggirala Vasantha. I am on the teaching faculty of the Department of Linguistics at Osmania University. This is course 10, module 28 of neurolinguistics part of the psychoneurolinguistics course. The topic of this lecture is electrophysiological methods used in neurolinguistics. The main objective is I'd like to describe two main electrophysiological techniques. One is electroencephalography, or popularly it is known as EEG, and magnetoencephalography, or MEG. Alright. So EEG involves placing electrodes all around the scalp, as you will see in the picture of a little girl attached to the EEG machine, and the electrical signals are monitored on the computer as shown in the picture. Now I will say a little bit about the history of how EEG developed. The first recording of the electrical activity from the human scalp, it took place in 1924. The electrical activity is monitored from the pyramidal cells in the cortex. EEG was used to identify evoked potentials in response to sensory stimuli in the year 1939. American Electroencephalography Society was formed in 1940. Research into development of the concept called evoked response potential, I will explain that in a minute, but this more research involving ERPs took place during 54 and 1970s with initially non-language stimuli, but later on language related ERPs are also work took place in the 80s. Language related ERPs basically started publications about language related ERPs can be date back to about 80s also. Let's start with looking at what are the different kind of electrical signals brain generates. The picture on the screen, you will see from bottom to top different waveforms. The lowest one is called delta wave. It is elicited when you are in deep sleep, you are not conscious, your brain throws delta waves. Okay? Delta wave frequency ranges from 0.5 to 4 hertz. The next, I am going from bottom to top, the next higher level is called theta wave. Theta waves range from 4 to 8 hertz, and then you have, I will talk about the differences later on. So you have delta and then theta, and the next higher level is called alpha, that is between 8 to 13 hertz, and then you have beta, which is 13 to 20 hertz. Basically, the highest level, that is the beta waves, are elicited when we are conscious and when we are engaged in cognitive, higher cognitive functions like thinking and reading and writing and speaking and that kind of thing. So obviously in neurolinguistics we are more interested in monitoring these beta waves. These waves, before we can make any sense of these waves, two steps are undertaken to process these beta waves. One is they are time locked to the stimulus that is given to you, so that they reflect the activity of the brain at the moment that stimulus reach your brain. So time locking with the stimulus is one step. Next step is they must be averaged, because there is so much of electrical activity happening in relation to a particular stimulus. One person is not enough. So you basically take beta waves and average them on a series of stimuli in a given condition across different participants. Okay. When you go through these two steps, what comes out is what is known as evoked response potential, ERP. Okay. This is the most important concept in electrophysiological methods of neurolinguistics, that is EEG. ERP is the most important physiological measure of neuronal activity taking place in brain when you are engaged in higher mental functions and you are conscious. There are different types of ERPs. One way of classifying them is exogenous ERPs, that is the early brain waves. Early ERPs having latencies of about 100 milliseconds or less. They are not sensitive to physical parameters of the evoking stimulus. They do not alter significantly depending upon the state of alertness, whether you are drowsy or whether you are fully conscious. That then they are not very sensitive to that. Okay, so you can do it on children who are asleep also. Endogenous ERPs are elicited by perceptual, motor, cognitive or linguistic stimuli reaching the brain, and they are sensitive to participants' expectations, decisions, task demands. And you would have figured out that endogenous ERPs are what are monitored when we are trying to study in neurolinguistic research. How does one read ERP waveform? In a typical waveform, you have x-axis representing time in milliseconds and y-axis representing voltage differences in microvolts. So, the ERP waves are referred to in relation to polarity, that is direction of current flow, whether the connections to the neurons are excitatory or that is therefore if they are excitatory they are positive, if they are inhibitory they are negative. So, when you refer to a ERT as minus 400 or plus 600, this is what is polarity means, plus and negative, referring to whether the activity is coming from excitatory neurons or inhibitory neurons. Latency in milliseconds is relative to the onset of the stimulus, that is ordinal position of the peaks. So, you refer to ERPs as N1, P2, N is negative, P is positive, N1, P1, P2, P3 like that numbers. So, they relate to latency immediately after the stimulus reaches the brain or after few milliseconds later. Let's start with one of the early ERP associated with response of the auditory brainstem. It's called MMN for mismatch negativity. MMN refers to mismatch negativity. Auditory mismatch negativity is brain's automatic response to change in neural response to events that occur close in time. There is something happening one after other. In a sequence, suddenly there is a change in that sequence. Your brain is surprised by sudden change. Then it throws up MMN. MMN is the ERP component elicited by deviations in a structured auditory sequence in a task called, the task used is called oddball. So, participant has to identify which is the odd stimulus. You have sequence of stimuli going on, there is an odd one, you have to identify that odd one. When the brain identifies the odd one, you get MMN, alright. You need to study the figure we are going to show next on the screen. And so, for instance, I have borrowed this from researchers who have done these experiments. So, MMN is basically a pre-attentive response. Okay, it is elicited by any discriminable change in repetitive auditory input. All right, the technique is called oddball paradigm. In this picture on the screen, you see one stimulus is long. It is ba. The next stimulus is ba, short. So, you give a series of stimuli, maybe long, short, long, short. So, that is how they, I will demonstrate to you. See, now you hear st, and then there is a deviance, then st. So, the deviant stimuli, when the brain detects something is odd or deviant from the regular, it throws up MMN. So, MMN is the result of detection of something which is deviant from the standard. Look at this experiment again on the screen. This instead of long and short, they have used this long and short stimuli. You see at the bottom of the figure, in block 1, you have ba, 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 ba. So, the red colored one is the deviant stimuli. when the brain is able to distinguish long from short, you should get MMN, alright. You can, the sequence can be altered. How many deviant stimuli should be there to how many standard stimuli, all that you can alter, but oddball experiment looks something like this. And let's look at what happened in one experiment conducted by Friedrich, Weber and Friedrich. It's published in 2004, and I'm borrowing these results, the whole experimental details from these authors. So what they noticed was, when they conducted this experiment on adults, by placing electrodes in 4 different areas on the scalp, so BA is the long stimuli, B is a short stimuli. Notice now on the screen, there is animation involved now in this particular figure, showing that very soon after they detected the odd stimuli, electrical activity increased, and that is what is being pointed out. The arrow is pointing out to peak in the electrical activity, and that is what is MMN. So adults consistently give out this kind of peak in electrical activity very soon after the stimulus is detected, oddball is detected, and that's what is called MMN. Look at the next one more figure on the screen. Again here, what they did was, they wanted to know whether it is only adult brain which is good at detecting oddballs, or what about infants. So they tried this experiment with long syllable and short syllable. They gave it to the 2-month-old infants, and they also gave it to the adults. Okay, they compared adults and 2-month-old infants. So they plotted these changes in electrical activity. The blue lines refer to adults, the red lines refer to infants. There is some change even in infants. Infants have detected it, but notice the adults, the MMN is going on the negative side, negative is plotted up, and the infants on the positive side. Okay, so 2-month-old infants also could detect BA from BA, but for whatever reason the response is slightly different. Okay, so basically how they summarize the results of this experiment is, infants by the age of 2 months are able to discriminate long syllables from short syllables. Infants more easily discriminate long syllables in a stream of short syllables than vice versa. That's the difference. For whatever reason, if you have short, long, short, long, that kind of, in a stream of short syllables, they were able to detect long syllable rather than the other way around. Infants also show positivity and not negativity. MMN is called mismatch negativity, right? But infants showed slightly positive response. Alright, but whatever it is, auditory brainstem responds to different type of a sequence of auditory stimuli, in which an odd ball is there, an odd stimulus is there. As early as 2 months, we can detect the difference. That's the final result. Let's now, instead of just syllables and sounds, let's go to words. So lexical processing. How does brain respond to lexical processing? Let's examine that. In evoked response, ERP in relation to lexical processing, one of the ERP identified as early as in 1980 it's called N400. Okay, the kind of stimuli they gave in these experiments when they wanted to study lexical processing is sentences which end with an odd word. Either they are standard sentences, acceptable sentences like, the bill was due at the end of the month, which is fine, semantically okay, grammatically okay. But suppose you are made to listen to a sentence like, the bill was due at the end of the hour. Now the hour doesn't fit in as well as month. Bills are usually collected at the end of the month. So the second sentence is a bit odd, right? So When you are processing sentences like that in B, where the last word is not adequately fitting in with the rest of the sentence, brain throws up an ERP called N400, which is a negative peak occurring 400 milliseconds after the sentence hit you. Let's look at the results reported in Trends in Cognitive Science 2005. I have borrowed their picture to explain to you. N400 looks like this. So, it doesn't mean exactly at 400. N400 can occur anywhere between 400 and 800. It's again the red line is showing N400, a peak around 400 milliseconds, and it is showing only for incongruous words. When the last word doesn't fit in, it's incongruous, you get N400. If that is not there, congruous words, look at the blue line, there is no peak. It's only red line is peaking at 400. That's why it's called N400. Now, again they wanted to know, is it only the adult brain which can distinguish incongruous words in sentences, or can children, 19-month-old children can detect incongruity when they are listening? They don't have to speak, all this is objective, right? So, they tried this experiment with 19-month-old infants, which is what you see the picture in the next on the screen. You will see that the FZ, FC3, CZ, there are locations, different locations on the scalp where electrodes are attached, and they have, the participants are made to listen congruent and incongruent stimuli. Even with 19-month-old infants, when what hit the brain is a sentence which has an incongruous last word, there is N400. As you can see the red line, the blue line, there is no peak in the electrical activity. That is, when it is congruous, fine, brain is not surprised. When it is incongruous, it's throwing up N400, and it is throwing up in 19-month-old infants and it's throwing up in adults. So, now the next on the screen you can see both 19-month-old data and adult data next to each other. Study that carefully, and red indicates the incongruous stimuli, blue is congruous stimuli, and in both cases there is N400. So, what's the interpretation that authors have made based on this experiment is that at the age of 19 months, infants can process semantic relations between words in a sentence. It's that early, okay. The N400 effect, however, is longer lasting than in adults, in children, okay. That is, as the N400 is taken to reflect integration, the interpretation of N400 is, it is about, is the last word can we integrate that into the rest of the sentence or not? That's what we mean by congruity and incongruity. When the last word cannot be integrated with the sentence, the brain is throwing up N400. These data basically are suggesting that integration process takes longer in infants. That's why N400 lasts longer in infants than adults. So, of course, infants don't know language as much as adults know. So, the question of whether the last one is odd or not, infants obviously take a little longer, okay. So, this is about lexical semantic processing by the brain. What about morphosyntax? What about understanding about grammaticality? Let's now turn to that topic. The EEG experiments with a focus on morphosyntactic processing consistently reported 3 types of ERPs. One is called ELAN, E-L-A-N, means early left anterior negativity, okay. I believe ELAN is elicited for word category mismatch and phrase structure violations, and this occurs between, because we are saying early, remember, so between 100 and 200 milliseconds after the stimulus hits the brain. So, it's early, it's negative, and it's anterior portion of the brain, it comes from the anterior portion and negative, right. So, left side, left hemisphere, anterior part of the brain, and it occurs early, ELAN, okay, and it is associated with word category mismatch, so noun for a verb or verb for something else, or there is some mismatch within grammatical category. The next ERP with morphosyntactic processing is called LAN, that is left anterior negativity, which is not as early as ELAN, therefore it is called LAN. It occurs around 300 to 500 milliseconds. This is also localized to neural networks in the inferior frontal gyrus. LAN is also frontal gyrus. When we say anterior, it means frontal gyrus, and also temporal gyrus. LAN is also associated with temporal gyrus. The third component ERP associated with morphosyntactic processing of sentences is P600. This starts around 500 milliseconds and reaches a peak around 600 milliseconds, the electrical activity. But it might range anywhere from 500 to even 900 milliseconds, depending on the task and all that. It's also sometimes referred to as SPS, that is syntax positive shift. Remember, P means positive. So, syntax positive shift or P600, both of them are the same. It is associated with syntactic processing, not lexical semantic, meaning it is not with sound, but it is grammatical thing. So, what kind of sentences generate ELAN, LAN and P600? What do we mean by morphosyntactic processing? What is it that we need to violate when we develop these sentences for tests like this? Word category constraints are violated, or case, person, number, gender agreement is not there, it is broken down, or phrase structure violations, subcategorization violation, that means verb agreement structure violation, long distance dependency violation, syntactic ambiguity violation resulting in garden path sentences. So, basically, after reading the e-text, I suggest you go back to the e-text in relation to this module, then try preparing material to create for a potential EEG study where you for violation of the ungrammatical sentences, violating all these different ways of violating. You try to do that in your language, and then you will understand quite a bit. But let's look a little closer at LAN, ELAN and P600 visually. Okay. Again, I have borrowed this from a published study, so you can see that LAN is left anterior negativity, ELAN is early LAN between 150 and 200 milliseconds associated with phrase structure violation. Suppose your brain hears something like, I like swim, instead of swimming, then it throws up ELAN. Late ELAN is between 300 and 500 milliseconds, and you get LAN when you hear something like, children likes candies. Children like, instead of like, you say likes, it's violation, so it's morphosyntactic agreement violation, and therefore LAN is produced, electrical activity ERP, which is called LAN. P600 or SPS, which occurs, as I told you, between 500 and even as much as 900, here they are saying 750, but 900 or even 1000 milliseconds it can occur, more localized to parietal lobe and all that. P600 occurs when you hear sentences like, the pizza was in the eaten. Morphosyntactic agreement violation also sometimes, every week they cuts grass. Syntactic ambiguity, the broker persuaded to sell the stock was tall. There the to is ambiguous, so you think about these sentences and you associate with each of the morphosyntactic processing, how brain is differentiating different types of violations and showing it through different types of ERPs. Next on the screen you will see ERPs generated by 24-month-old children, 32-month-old children and adults. the particular ERP that is compared is P600. You study this carefully, and what the researchers are saying is infant's brain is also sensitive to phrase structure violations in auditorily presented sentences at a very early age of 2.5 years. Their ERP pattern reflects initial process of structure building, that is, it throws up ELAN initially, as well as late processes of syntactic integration difficulties. So, if you are able to record ELAN as well as P600 in small children, you know that at a very early age they are able to distinguish phrase structure violation, which is an early process, from syntactic integration, which is a late process. Alright. So, then this let's move on to the next major electrophysiological measure used in neurolinguistic research called MEG, magnetoencephalography. MEG allows us to measure magnetic fields produced by the brain. The synaptic input into a neuron results in post-synaptic current that is associated with small magnetic field. That is, within the brain, small amount of magnetic field is generated when the neurons are active. When a sufficiently large population of neurons receive synaptic inputs, within a short window, the dendritic currents will sum up, producing a field which we can record using MEG. So, we are talking about averaging automatically many small magnetic fields in the synapse. You know, you have learnt in the very first module of first or second module of neurolinguistics. Synapse is where the axon meets the dendrite, and a neurochemical exchange takes place there, and that is what is necessary for action potential to develop. Action potential is what is electrical signal, and that is what we recorded in ERP, we have discussed in EEG. Now what we are saying is, in this process there is also a bit of magnetic signal generated, and those things, when you sum up across different synapses, it is strong enough to be picked up by a machine called MEG. So, the neuromagnetic field is still extremely weak compared to Earth's magnetic field. Okay. So, MEG makes use of MRI technology and superconducting quantum interference device. It is called SQUID, SQUID, which is very sensitive in detecting magnetic signals in the brain. So, using SQUID and MRI together, MEG makes use of, monitors the magnetic signals in the brain when you are engaged in different activities. Look at the, you have MEG on the rightmost side. MEG is able to give us information about function and structure of the brain by making use of MRI machine and generating magnetic fields. So, magnetic fields and MRI together help monitor the both structural and functional information. MEG can provide both. So, how does MEG work? MEG is, it starts with recording of those tiny magnetic fields naturally generated by the neuronal cells, neurons in different parts of the brain. The magnetic fields are detected by sophisticated technology based on superconducting detectors, which I already told you, SQUIDs. The magnetic fields are then analyzed to find from which location they are coming. Alright. So, you locate the neuronal source of the brain from where that magnetic signal is coming. The resulting source locations are then superimposed on an MRI image for planning surgery. If suppose that MRI image shows there is something happening in one area and that area is very important for language, the surgeon has to spare that area. That is why we need to do MRI or MEG or whatever to find out what exactly is happening in different parts of the brain. So, again on the screen you have another picture giving some ideas about the various properties of MEG and comparing MEG with SPECT and MRI and PET, the various hemodynamic methods I have described to you in the last module. If you study the figure on the left side carefully, it's showing that MEG has excellent temporal resolution as well as spatial resolution compared to fMRI or PET or SPECT or MRS or EEG. Compared to any of the techniques, MEG, of course it is costly, but it has excellent temporal and spatial resolution. Okay, that brings me to the end of today's lecture. Let me just summarize quickly. I have described two techniques, electroencephalography and magnetoencephalography. I have said that electroencephalography monitors the electrical signals thrown up by the brain in relation to either auditory signals, events which occur in sequence, and suddenly there is an oddball, then it generates MMN. Then I talked about other language related ERPs like I have talked about N400 associated with lexical semantic processing, and ELearn, LAN and P600, all three of them are associated with morphosyntactic violations in sentences. And the interesting fact is that very young children are also able to produce these ERPs somewhat qualitatively different from adults, but at a very early age, infant brains are also able to detect something odd in sounds or something odd in terms of the sentence structure. Either the last word is not getting integrated with the rest of the sentence, or there are some violations of agreement between subject and verb, or some kind of morphosyntactic violation. Even young children are able to detect that. Magnetoencephalography is better than EEG in terms of both spatial and temporal resolution. It is superior to EEG. How MEG has been used in understanding language processing, you will have to refer to eText. Time does not permit me to go into those details, and various studies have been reviewed in the eText and additional readings were suggested. So, I suggest that you refer to eText and these readings to understand how EEG and MEG have been extensively used in neurolinguistic research involving language processing, especially since about 1990s. Lot of research. Thank you.